Okay, welcome back. Welcome back, Galem. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
We're gonna have a fun show. We have some guests with us. Before we get into this likely spirited debate,
hmm
let me go ahead and introduce our guest today joining us on the podcast. We have Prince Anyanwu, who is an enterprise SDR over at Tigergraph. He's been in tech for a little while now. He's held a number of roles, and I'm very excited to get his perspective on this. We also have Molly O'Sullivan, who is the founder of Molly Co. They actually help B2B SaaS companies scale by working with them on product, identifying product market fit, and building repeatable sales processes. And then finally, but certainly not least, we have Star Button, who has been a leader in a number of SaaS technology companies on the revenue side. More recently, she was the VP of Global Sales and Business Development over at User Testing and is now the CRO for Jobs for Humanity.
I mean, where do we begin? So, fake it until you make it. This has been the question, and so much that I had to put it on Instagram. I was so curious to see, like, what does my friend families believe right now? Fundamentally, are we on the same page? You know what I mean? And because when we had this conversation, Robert, in the last conversation we had for the podcast, we were immediately like, no. I said, like, when we talked about fake it till you make it, I don't know how it came up, I don't remember, but you said, yeah, I believe in that. And I said, absolutely not. I don't believe in that. And that's when we knew, like, okay, one, either this is where, we terminate this relationship for the podcast, or two, this is when we dig deeper and figure out why we believe what we believe, right? There's a reason to why we both strongly were like, yes and no and stand by it. And we're not here to convince anyone to go and change their mind about anything, but we want to have the conversation and understand, why do you believe in what you believe? So I'll kick it off why I do not believe. So I'm a strong no to fake it till you make it, because to me, it's very inauthentic to try to fake it to whatever capacity. Let's say it's in a new job and you're really trying to just fit in and you're doing all the right things and following, whatever the order is, just to kind of fit in, just to get to wherever you need to go, maybe get that promotion and do whatever else you need to do next. That to me seems very inauthentic if you're going against your own beliefs in order to achieve something else. That to me doesn't seem right. So that's why to me it's like, fake it till you make it. I don't believe it. I don't think it's a great advice to give anyone who is young coming into this new world, because it's kind of just slapping like something on them saying like follow society or do something just in order to make it to this next level, and it's giving you like a linear path that I think is misleading. So I'm a strong no to fake it till you make it. How about you, Robert? And why do you believe what you believe?
Well, here's what I'll say. Here's my perspective on it. First and foremost, I think there's two reasons why someone would ultimately need to fake it in order to make it. It's either one, they don't believe in themselves, so it's almost like fake it till you make it. So that's one kind of side of it. The other side is maybe you do have supreme confidence in yourself. Maybe you do believe in yourself, but maybe you're going into a space where you might be the only, or this is, you know what I'm saying? Or perhaps there's some bias. So I would agree with you. I know we're going to get into the details here in a bit, but I would definitely agree with you that going against your morals and what you believe in, that's actually a line that I wouldn't cross either. But I think when we talk about breaking into tech sales, I think fake it till you make it could also, it just means, try to find those lines of those lines of similarities, or the areas where you can potentially fit in, because at the end of the day, for a long time, companies have looked more for culture fit versus culture add. And although I think the best companies, the best employers are along the lines of how you see this and look for diversity and look for that, I think that, for the many of companies that don't do that, and for that person that's trying to get their foot in their door, get that experience, you don't want to fumble the bag by being your truly, truly, truly authentic self, because it's about leverage. So I'll stop there. I'll let other folks kind of share their input, but that's kind of where I stand on the topic.
Okay, that's fair. Would love to hear from everyone else. Molly, Prince, or whoever wants to go next. Would love to hear it.
I agree with both of you. I think, Gail, it's
Come
interesting
on now.
that you mentioned going against your morals. And obviously, you know, we've brought that up. Thank you, Robert. I think anyone should avoid going against their morals. That's, you know, or not, pardon me. Yes, going against them. Don't do it. But I think, to your point, you've got to be confident in an industry like this. And if you don't project confidence, even when you're learning something that does take time, we've got a lot of people that have switched industries. It's going to take time to feel confident in sales. What I've noticed, though, is that there are an innate number of people who have this overconfidence. So I think if you're the type of person to wonder about your own limits, you're not who we're worried about. There are many people who just think that they've made it no matter what. So, you know, it's a delicate balance between hubris and confidence. And I think you need a decent amount of confidence to make it in this space, but you certainly don't want to, I don't know, try to swim across the English Channel. That's, you know, a not so fake it till you make it moment. Because the consequences could be different. So yeah, I think it depends on the situation.
Okay. Fair. Star?
Well, you know, I'm a very anti fake it till you make it. So I'm here to support you in this. You know, I've been on both sides of the fence. I have literally been hired and told we have to hire a woman. That was said to me one time. And I've been that kid that grew up with special needs, I guess you would say. Back then, they didn't know the ADHD or on the spectrum or how much we talk about neurodiversity now. But I was that child that would sit and spin in my chair in class, and they would move me to the back of the class, and I would ask why. Not because I was challenging per se. I needed to know why so I could understand. I have never have never really felt that I fit into the corporate mold. I've even been putting on teams where they say belonging. I'm like, I don't belong here. I don't fit in here. For me, if you're not bringing your true, authentic self to work, you are faking it. You are fake, and we're not getting the essence of who you truly are. This last build, you mentioned user testing. That last build was an SDR BDR team. I've never built that team before. I'll be honest. I did not know what I signed up for the first day when I came in. And I was like, I'm a middle school mother right now. What is going on? There's all this drama. There's all these personalities, but we've got this job to do. And we grew that team from 10 to 86 on a global level. And by the end of it, we had every walk of life. But it was because I pushed back on recruiting and quit hiring for experience, quit hiring for your resume. And I would show up to interviews with just a first name. I wouldn't even know if they were male or female, black, white, gay, straight, Republican, Democrat. You don't know any of that because I wouldn't even look at their resume. I wouldn't even see what they stood for. And I would show up and have a conversation. And I think leadership fails teams as a whole when we don't invite people to show up as themselves to work, because who you are is so perfectly wonderful in what your strength lies. And if you are hiding that or not speaking up or not using your voice as a leader, I don't get that essence. I don't get that strength that complements my weakness. And you've got people that struggle trying to live up to this mold or fit into this concept of who they're supposed to be, that then carries home because they feel like they're not, you know, producing the way they should because they're in the wrong role. But if they're not able to speak up and say, hey, I'm not an SDR, I'm not a BDR, I want to be in marketing, I want to be in HR, and then understanding that instead of you fit in this mold and fake it until we either break you or we fire you or we create some nonsense to move you out of the org. So I'm a big proponent. Show up, warts and all. Let's get in the dirt, find out what your strengths are, and leverage those forward.
Love that perspective, Star. Thank you for sharing. I also would love to hear from Prince where you're standing and what your thoughts are. What are you thinking, Prince?
Yeah, so I'm on the I don't agree faking it till you make it. Like the way I look at it is that I feel like if you have like the skills and the confidence, there is no reason to fake it, you know, till you make it. I think that the biggest reason why is that most people like when you break it down to the, I guess, to the micro levels, because they probably don't have like the skills, you know, they probably don't have the confidence. Then I always like to reverse engineer it. It's like, okay, why do you feel like you have to fake it? It's like, okay, you're probably not that good at interview. Let's practice. Like, you know, let's role play. Or Galen, goes what's the name of your podcast? I think it's like, isn't it like with your why? Like, you know, I know like that's your
legacy.
Yeah, what's your legacy or what's your why? Like, I feel like everybody has like, you know, their legacy, their why. Like, all right, let's figure that out and be able to, you know, tell that story when you show up to the, you know, when you show up to like to the interview, or, you know, with your manager or whatever. And so I feel like that's like the biggest issue. And then I feel like too, yeah, Robert, when you were talking about culture fit and culture add, like, to me, I don't know if this is controversial, but I feel like it's not a problem. Like, if a certain company has a certain culture, I feel like there is no reason to fake it. Like, you should show up like your true self and know what you bring to the table, so you can quickly find out like if y'all match, or that you or you might have something where it may be unique, where it'd be like, okay, like we have this certain culture, but you know, you have certain attributes and something like where we have, and then now you can add it, but you match, like, I guess maybe like, I don't know, 80 or 90%. But I feel like if you're coming and you're faking it, but like, oh, they want this, so I'm gonna come and show up and be like this a certain way. Yeah, I feel like it's just this is a recipe for disaster. So I don't know. I feel like the main thing is like, yeah, having the confidence, knowing like, you know, your own story, you know, like your own why, like why you want to do like a certain thing. And then even to Star's point is, yeah, like I know when we're talking about like with tech sales, like there's like a lot of people that they know that to get into the industry, you have to start off as a SDR, that maybe they want to get, you know, venture off to marketing and all that. Like, bring it up. Like, you shouldn't be afraid. Like, you know, like, all right, you know, getting in here is like, you have like the skill set and what you bring to the table to the sales, but you might have whatever in your background that you're also passionate in marketing. I feel like that'll be a great thing for them to be like, okay, you know, that's good to know, because you can be able to, I don't know, there might be like a project or, you know, something where you can also work with marketing. And then when a position opens up and they need somebody to, you know, they're thinking about who could we move over there. You brought it up like you weren't faking it. Like you came with your authentic self and you laid everything out on the table, because I don't know. I feel like we've seen too many
that
of these.
is more to me like that's just a matter of communication. Like, are you willing to communicate and be open and transparent with the people you work with, your team lead, your managers, whoever? But to me, when we talk about fake it till you make it, one thing, and I don't know if this is the connection, but like fake it till you make it might have something to do with when people have imposter syndrome, where they're like, oh, I don't know, do I deserve this? Am I supposed to do this? Am I good enough for this? You know, did I move into this role too quickly? Maybe they got promoted, you know, from SDR to BDR, BDR to AE, or another route completely. Maybe they switched field, made a complete transition, and they're like, holy shit, I got to do something to make sure that I can fit into this mold right now. So I'm just gonna be like, not faking it. Maybe they just want to be a little extra, whatever that means, you know, like extra spicy, extra. And that helps them like get closer to their goals. And is that also faking it? Like, I don't know.
Well, I always like to use sports. It's like, for example, like, let's say, you know, like in sports, okay, like right now it's the like in football, it's the division games. And then for the Super Bowl, let's say if you never made it to the Super Bowl, you can't fake it. Like, there is no faking it till you make it, because you've never been in the Super Bowl, but you can prepare, like, you know what I mean? Like all the preparation, the film study, there's a reason why you're on track to go to the, you know, to the Super Bowl, because of all the hard work. So Galem, like the point that you brought up is like, that's why it's good to celebrate, or, you know, look and be like, okay, what have I accomplished? It's like, what are all the wins, you know, that I have, and, you know, what have I done? And then be able to translate that into like, you know, your story or why, like, so that's the way how I look at it, because I don't know, maybe it's just me. I don't think you can, I feel like you'll get exposed eventually, because there is no faking it till you making it. It's like, I like sports, or if you haven't been a champion, let's say you're on the pathway to being a champion, you're not a champion, so you can't fake it being a champion, because you don't have the Super Bowl, you don't have the ring, but you can prepare yourself, so like you can feel confident. So it'd be like, hey, like, you know, you did the preparation, you know, you got these accomplishments, you know, your teammates are saying like, you know, this is one of the best player. Your coaches is saying all this and that. So yeah, that's where I'm at with that.
Let me,
Oh,
can
yeah.
I back
Yes.
up here? Sorry.
Jump in, sorry.
You can use that analogy, but where it falls is on that coach and leadership, because we can lead you to a Super Bowl and say, okay, and then you can come and think, you know, if I just keep my head down and do all the right things, but then your coach goes, okay, now go throw the ball with your left hand. And you're going, but I'm right-handed. And unless you have that bandwidth to speak up and say, well, no, that doesn't work for me, because you know, we both want to get touchdowns. We want to score. We want to get that Super Bowl ring, but you need to be in touch with your key players to know that I'm not going to throw a wrench in your play that suits you, that you don't have to fake it. Now, what happens if I hand you the ball and you're faking it? You're like, okay, I'm left-handed out here. Next thing you know, everybody hates you because you just lost the Super Bowl. So you want to make sure from a leadership perspective, yes, know your plays, but also know how to raise a hand and make a play better, and work for a leader that encourages you to do so, because that's the essence of a true team.
That's awesome. You know, I want to, I think there's a couple themes here that I think we need to touch on. And I think there's the aspect of what can an IC, someone starting their career, what can they do so that they don't have to fake it till they make it. And I think that's what you were touching on, Prince, is like practice and like know your story. I also think what you're saying, Star, about leadership, like there has to be like, how can leadership enable their people and their future people so that they don't have to fake it till they make it? I want to transition into that, but before we do, I have a question for everyone, and maybe Molly, we can start with you. But how is there like a scale? Is there like like how authentic should someone be? And I'll give you a quick story. I had a friend who was she was interviewing, but she was also she was pregnant, and she was afraid of being super authentic and vulnerable about that in her interview process, because she was afraid that the company might think I won't work as hard, or that X, Y, and Z. And so I you know, I guess the question, and I think there's like examples of this for every, you know, demographic, right? Like I know some young you know, person just out of college, they're into some things like, you know, the rap, the hip hop culture, and like, you know, these other types of things. How authentic should they be? Whether that be early on in the interview process, or maybe the hiring manager asks, well, what are you into outside of work? Or they get hired and like it's a culture thing, and like they're again the only person that looks like them. How authentic should someone be? And so I guess that's a question we can start with you, Molly. Like, do you believe that there's a scale of where someone should kind of fall in authenticity?
Yikes. I love being myself. I love being truly authentic. I definitely have a number of friends who have seen that on display. So I love being able to bring my authentic self. But as Star mentioned, I've had some of the same situations. I'm neurodivergent. I have ADHD. It wasn't something that anybody knew about until I was almost 30. So there's always this element of not knowing how you fit in, not knowing necessarily how you learn best. So I think, you know, a lot of it is coming up with what works best for you. As you mentioned, though, if you're new and coming into this from, you know, let's say school, this is your first professional job, you've switched industries. There is, I think, a really important part to knowing what you're really good at, and that you do have skills, and just trying to find ways that they're transferable. But I also think there's a little bit of danger. I mean, I'd be remiss to say that there's not danger in bringing your fully authentic self to an interview, because there are, like we said, people who hire for culture fit. As a female in sales, I can certainly say that there have been different industries where that's felt more glaring than others. You know, and I think it's important that people know that, because to me, that's where the kind of maybe comes into play. That's why faking it until you make it is all right in certain situations, because you know you've got transferable skills, you're confident in yourself, and maybe all the pieces of the puzzle haven't come together yet, but you can put together a puzzle. So, I mean, back to authentic self, it depends. Bring as much of yourself as you're willing to share, and not pack away. Because, I mean, to everyone's point, communication is really important. You need to bring the part of you that you won't box up.
So it sounds like it's circumstantial, like kind of got to be self-aware and kind of measure the situation yourself. I mean, Star, do you have thoughts on that? Like, is there a spectrum of where people's how authentic someone should be?
I mean, I have Tourette's syndrome. It's not, if I'm thinking and it comes out of my mouth, if it doesn't come out of mouth, my face tells you what I'm thinking. And it, to Molly's point, that has been my strength and equally my kryptonite in my career, because there's no gray area for me. There's right and there's wrong, and there's facts and there's data. And when you start getting those blurred areas, that's when I get all confused, because I'm like, wait, I didn't say that, and everybody's like, shut your mouth. Well, to that point, you go and find where you fit. Like, you kind of build your army along the way and you go where you fit. So when you ask, like, I'll give you an example of when we started hiring against the grain. I had a woman show up for an interview, had been a police officer for 10 years, wanted to get into a different profession because now she had a family. She was 25 weeks pregnant with her baby, and she wanted to have a baby because her wife had the first one and she wanted to experience. I hired her, and she ended up doing over 200% of her number because someone gave her an opportunity. But she came, she said, look, I am a pregnant ex-cop lesbian. Will you give me a chance? And I'm like, let's see what you got. And you set very clear expectations of what's expected. On the other end of that spectrum, I've had people show up at this interview and they come in with their suits on and their degrees and, what 5 books should I be reading? And I'm like, not your girl. If it's longer than the average crap, I don't read it. I don't have the attention span. I'm visual. But go talk to this person on my team because they read everything. And I get them, hey, read this, give me the synopsis. And I said, why are you a reader? And he goes, I hate reading. And I'm like, well, why did you ask me that? And he said, well, I was told in interview prep to ask leaders about themselves and what they're reading. And they will talk for 20 minutes about themselves, and you don't really have to answer questions. And I was like, well, why don't you take off that time? We'll start over. And then we had a real conversation about his goals and what he could actually bring to the table. And it was an SDR that became a BDR and a MIA that's now one of the top ones over there. So it's, it's up to us to, again, to reset. Yes, bring your authentic self. Don't drop F-bombs in your interview. But, that's to me is where that fake it till you make it. I'm not showing up talking like I would normally talk once people know me. But that's about the only thing you don't get.
Yeah, you're making a lot of valid points. For me, it's like, first of all, not all roles, not all people, not all companies are created equal to begin with. So just knowing that sets you up for a scenario where it really depends. Sometimes you do have to go the less of the extra mile of being you. You have to be less of, you can't show all of you at once, maybe, or in certain settings, or whatever the case might be. And it's unfortunate, but either you buy into that or you don't. And here's a good example of this that sometimes can frustrate me, because we live in this echo chamber a lot of the times on, let's say, LinkedIn or any other social platform. You hang out with your people, your people, you consume content, information from your networks and your people, and that's that. When do you really venture out of that? Not often, unless someone comes with a particular recommendation or your advertisements are on point and marketing is doing a great job. But in the instance when it's not this case, you're like in this bubble of the same people and you're consuming the same shit over and over again. So of course, you're going to get adjusted and consumed by that. And one thing that sets us up very differently in this case with, let's say, content, social media, is you look at someone who does not work for a company, someone who might have their own company, their own maybe consultancy or agency or whatever. That person can show up and really speak on their experience. They can speak a lot more, maybe. I'm not saying they can or cannot do that, but they might feel inclined or more comfortable doing that if they're on their own and they have freedom of their own destiny and their own future, versus someone who's dependent on a paycheck from an employer. How comfortable are they going to be putting their job in jeopardy? How comfortable are they going to be putting certain boundaries in place in order to show up as their authentic self? I've had conversations with people in those situations that feel stuck and that they can't show up as their authentic selves because they work for someone else. So can you really show up at you? Like, is there a range? I don't fucking know what the range is of being authentic or not authentic, but what I can tell you is that at least I can show up in the places that I choose and I can be myself. Like right now, I feel like swearing, I'm gonna swear. I don't give a shit. But there might be other places where I don't do that at all. And you see completely other side of the spectrum and you go, well, does that mean you're being inauthentic then? Maybe. And if someone wants to label that, then go ahead, label it. Like, who cares? But I just think it's an interesting conversation, because where do we really draw the line at the end of the day?
Well, there's also a respect factor to that when you're like, because I have the mouth of a sailor, like everybody knows that. It's the worst. But you want to be respectful in certain situations. If you are being conducive to that environment, or someone speaking that doesn't speak that way, and you want to make sure you're representing them well. So I don't think of that as being authentic. I think of that as being very highly aware of your surroundings and adjusting your authentic self to that environment.
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds a little bit, Galem, like you're coming to the middle a little bit. I might be wrong, but we're at the end of the day, we're going to come together. We're going to have a kumbaya, and this is going to be all good anyway. But one question that I have for the group here is, it sounds like one of the keys so that you don't have to fake it till you make it and you can be your authentic self is finding leadership, finding a company that values authenticity and diversity neurally, in every way of diverse, right? So we can start with Prince on this one. Are there attributes or things that you might look out for, or perhaps like will give you clues early on in an interview process or job search that, like, okay, this is a company where I actually am confident that I can be my authentic self? Or are there things that you do personally, like in an interview, to kind of suss that out? Do you have any thoughts there?
Yeah. I think like the biggest thing is just the stuff that they ask you, and just even what Star said, like, because you'll go into some interviews where they're all buttoned up and all super serious, and so you can kind of tell. Because I remember even when I was starting off and doing interviews where you see some people where they're like so damn serious, and it's like, okay, I understand it's like an interview, but already off the top of my head, I already know that, yeah, most likely probably don't want to work with them. So I'm moving this company down like my list. And then there's the other ones where you could just tell like how curious they are about, like, yeah, we could look at the resume and, where all you work. But when they're actually, diving deeper and trying to, like, understand you more as a person and what's important to you. So it's like, okay, then you can kind of start to piece out and see like what type of, leader or manager, they are, and what's in, like what's on your priority, like, and then I also think humor too. I like people that have like humor, because I don't care who you are. Like my one of my favorite CEO is Elon Musk, and so he's always like cracking jokes and making laughing, and he's he's one of the most wealthiest person in the on the world, like in the planet. And if he can take himself not so serious, then there's no reason for everybody else to be all super buttoned up and being serious. And so I think that's what it is just seeing just getting to know them on a human level. And so like I feel like with me, like when you're asking me, like when I was doing like my interviews, it's like, yeah, you know how it is when you come, you do your small talk, they check to make sure everything's like qualified, and then then you actually start talking to them like as a human being and seeing if you have that connection. And then Robert, when you were saying that, seeing like if there's an alignment of like like what they value, like I always like to ask people like, okay, like why did you like join this company, and like what are the top 3 reasons, and then you can quickly see the stuff that they're mentioning if there's like alignment, like with yourself. Because you ask multiple people within the company, and you can see like, is there like a reoccurring theme, or is it like kind of sporadic, or and et cetera. And then you can make your decision, like if you're interviewing with multiple companies, to see like if this is a good fit for myself, or if you see like, man, they didn't mention, you asked multiple people and they didn't mention this one thing at all. So that might be a red flag if that's important to you, if you want to join this company or not.
That's great, Prince. Molly and Star, I want to kind of send the same question to you, but actually take the more leadership, like the leadership perspective. Like, what can leadership do to enable, their employees or their future employees to feel comfortable bringing their authentic selves, whether it be to work or to the interview process, or you can touch on why it's important. Like, what's the value? What's in it for them to enable this for their company?
I've got a really good one on this.
Okay.
And it still stings a little bit. It doesn't, but it does. I had several interviews with a company, talked to multiple departments. There was a call set up to talk with the chief revenue officer. So I'm like, okay, we're working remote. I can guarantee that the women, if not everybody on the call, can understand the value of putting yourself together for a C-suite leader when you're going to have a video call, right? There was a gentleman who was, let's just say he changed the appointment multiple times, which whatever, things happen, pushed it back at the last minute, and then changed it into a phone call while he was getting into an Uber, extremely distracted. And I could just tell, to your point, there was no interest in me. There was no interest in a human being who had, prioritized this particular call. So it, to me, felt like, if you're actually going to put somebody on the phone or set up an interview for them, it should be that mutual respect. So it was, to me, a glaring red flag that was something that they didn't consider or just didn't care about. And generally, it made me look less favorably on their company. So I think leaders have to show that they are interested in more than just the questions that they're supposed to answer. I think, Star, you've talked about a bunch of things that just make me want to work with you. But I love the fact that you are invested in people as humans. There are plenty of interview processes where, 85, 90, 95% of the time is someone leading the conversation rather than engaging. So, I think it's important to prioritize places that align with your values.
I love it.
I cannot agree with you more, Molly. I 100% agree. But, to your point, Robert, from a leadership perspective, it's just important that our team understands us and how we tick as we understand them, because they need to be able to communicate on both sides of the table. Because I'm so transparent, like I get invited to their weddings and all this stuff, like all these millennials. I remember the first day I started and I started talking to them, and every single one of the girls cried in our first one-on-one. And I'm thinking, what is going on? Like, what did I just step into here? But you realize it's that when people just ask you, like, what do you think? What do you see? Like, want to know your thoughts on something and genuinely want to take that and say, okay, here is where you're going to be an asset. I'm going to use you here on my team, and I'm going to give you responsibilities, and I'm going to give you opportunities to shine. And then I'm going to give you feedback when you fuck it up. So it takes all of that from the start to the finish, but we have to be receptive to that exact same feedback. We have to be, because trust me, I learned new words. I learned all kinds of stuff, but I was basically managing 86 reps that were my children's age. So it's hard not to feel that bond with them or to feel that way as a leader. And I think we lack that as leadership. I think we lack that trickle down and push back up mentality that I'm here, I know everything, I've got all this experience. And the second you start thinking that way, you are no longer valuable as a leader. So to me, that's the most important piece, is you being servant in your leadership.
I love that. Servant in your leadership. I'm a big fan of servant leadership. Sorry, I'm submitting my resume after this, by the way. So
we are, and that's why I co-founded it. I'm Chief Revenue Officer for Jobs for Humanity, and we 100% represent underrepresented talent in the workspace, not just because you are a disabled veteran, person of color, single parent, blind, deaf, autistic. And we're not only placing these people of value, we are training the people that are employing them to understand how to gain the essence of those people in the workplace, like autistic coders at Google. But you need to understand how to manage an autistic player at the table, and you get this beautiful mind that's so rich in your environment. So it's a very, we have 106,000 candidates already in our database that represent, and it's growing by about 150 to 200 a day. So anything y'all want to be a part of, coming, mentoring, volunteering, joining the movement, ping me. I'm more than happy to talk to anybody.
We'll be in touch.
Thank you, Star. Thank you so much. Like, there's so many great resources. The work Star is doing with Jobs for Humanity is incredible. So we put all of that in the notes as well. But yeah, I think, Robert, is the idea that you and I are actually going to have this conversation in our next chat, what we ended with.
Yes, I think we should discuss the takeaways, because I think there's lots of takeaways. I think, there's the top down, there's the bottom up, and, realistically, the goal here is to get people meaningful work and help these companies grow in a way that, brings in diverse and authentic people from different backgrounds. So
have you used my company? We will load you up with unbelievably skilled and talent diverse candidates.
Most definitely.
Perfect.
Yeah, let's touch on it. Let's touch on that, Galem.
Yeah, and you two need to have a chat too, because what Robert is doing with JobSki will fit in perfectly here too. So there are so many good conversations to be had, and I'm so glad that you all made it for our very first roundtable. So thank you. Thank you for being here. It's been an absolute pleasure. Can't wait for the next opportunity we have to connect and have these conversations. I really enjoyed hearing all of your perspectives. Anything else that we want to leave this conversation with? It's an open floor right now.
Just thank you for letting us be a part of it. I was like, Galem, let me join this, because this is right in my wheelhouse. And
yeah,
and to your point, Robert, we don't have to agree on things, and talking about our different views and talking about the why adds that other layer of lending understanding, because you gives you views. You may not necessarily resonate, or your experience may not lend that understanding, but working with colleagues and understanding their perspective creates and bridges that gap so that we can work more closely together.
exactly.
It's important.
Yes.
I think what you're talking about is so much more about how leadership can be so much better at bringing in diverse candidates and fostering an environment where people can bring their authentic self. So I want to cheers that, because I hope more leaders hear this and are inspired.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. And I was going to say, Star, we need more leaders like you, because I feel like what it is, everybody's so siloed or got their head in the sand that we need more of this, like more open debate, like where like it's positive, like nobody's angry at each other. Everybody's sharing their different viewpoints so you can understand all the different perspectives, because like you said, everybody comes from different backgrounds, race, whatever, like you said, like just like with everything. So we need more of this, and this needs to be like, broadcasted out to like all the leaders so they can see, because they might be enlightened and be like, oh wow, I never knew this, because they're just so solid off in their bubble that they think that this is how things should be, or this is what we should only be looking for. So I think this was great.
I agree with you 1,000%, Prince. So that's it. All the listeners, watchers, like, subscribe, share. But yes.
Love it. Thank you so much for your insight. This has been really nice conversation. I've enjoyed every single minute of it, and can't wait for the next time.
Awesome.
Thank you all. It was a pleasure meeting you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.